When Mehmed I took the Ottoman throne in 1413, he inherited more than a shattered empire. The political chaos left by his father's defeat at Ankara and the ensuing civil war had not only fractured internal unity, but also damaged the empire's reputation abroad. Once feared as a rising force in both Europe and the Islamic world, the Ottomans now appeared as a wounded animal surrounded by hungry predators. The Byzantine Empire, once a vassal to Mehmed's father, began reaching out to rival claimants in hopes of weakening the Ottomans permanently. The Christian kingdoms in the Balkans, like Serbia and Wallachia, saw opportunity in Ottoman disunity. And in the east, the looming shadow of the Timurid Empire remained a constant threat. For Mehmed, restoring the empire would require more than armies and reforms. It would require diplomacy as his sharpest weapon. One of Mehmed's earliest diplomatic victories came with the Byzantine Empire. During the interregnum, the Byzantines had supported his brother, Suleiman Çelebi, in exchange for territorial concessions and political favors. However, once Mehmed defeated Suleiman and became the undisputed ruler, he had a choice: punish the Byzantines for meddling or turn them into allies. He chose the latter. Mehmed understood that a military campaign against Constantinople would drain his resources and give other enemies the chance to strike. Instead, he offered peace. He signed treaties that reaffirmed previous borders and secured a non-aggression pact. In return, the Byzantines provided safe passage across the Bosphorus when Mehmed needed to cross into Europe to deal with his other rival, Musa Çelebi. This brilliant maneuver allowed Mehmed to eliminate Musa and unify the empire, thanks in part to Byzantine ships and neutrality. By treating the Byzantines not as enemies but as chess pieces in a greater strategy, Mehmed stabilized his western flank. This approach gave him room to rebuild his internal administration without fear of a Christian crusade or naval blockade. His use of diplomacy here was not born of weakness but of foresight. He knew the empire needed time to breathe, and buying that time through peace was more valuable than any short-term military victory. In the Balkans, Mehmed faced a delicate situation. Serbia, Wallachia, and other Christian principalities had long been semi-autonomous under Ottoman rule. During the interregnum, many of these territories had refused to pay tribute and instead offered support to one of Mehmed's brothers. Now, with the civil war ended, Mehmed had to reassert control, but without igniting a war on multiple fronts. Once again, diplomacy proved to be his greatest tool. He sent envoys to Stefan Lazarevio, the Serbian despot, offering renewal of tribute agreements and mutual defense clauses. In exchange, Serbia retained nominal autonomy but was once again recognized as an Ottoman vassal. This move neutralized a potential threat and brought back much-needed revenue to the Ottoman treasury. Mehmed used similar strategies with Wallachia and Bosnia. He avoided direct confrontation and instead offered negotiated settlements that reaffirmed the old Ottoman hierarchy. Local rulers could keep their thrones, provided they pledged loyalty, sent troops when needed, and resumed tax payments. Through this calculated diplomacy, Mehmed re-established Ottoman influence in the Balkans without bloodshed, rebuilding both prestige and power through the stroke of a pen, not the edge of a sword. Meanwhile, the Eastern Front presented a different challenge. The Timurid Empire, under the command of Timur's successors, remained a looming threat in Persia and Central Asia. Though Timur himself had died in 1405, his legacy continued to influence regional politics. Many Turkish tribes in eastern Anatolia remained loyal to Timur's memory, and some even questioned the legitimacy of the Ottoman rule. Rather than provoke the Timurids or challenge their territorial claims, Mehmed sought peace through indirect diplomacy. He opened channels with Persian emissaries, exchanged gifts with minor Timurid governors, and allowed trade routes from Central Asia to pass through Ottoman lands safely. This policy of tolerance avoided another confrontation and secured the eastern border. One of the most notable aspects of Mehmed's diplomacy with Persia was his non-interference approach. He did not seek to claim Persian lands or spread influence beyond eastern Anatolia. Instead, he focused on internal unity and let the Timurids deal with their own succession crises. This non-aggressive stance was reciprocated. The Timurids, dealing with their own internal rebellions and succession issues, had no interest in launching another campaign into Anatolia. In this way, Mehmed secured peace not through alliances, but by removing incentives for war. It was a passive yet powerful form of diplomacy, one that gave the Ottomans breathing space to recover without provoking larger conflicts. Mehmed's diplomatic genius wasn't limited to state-to-state relations. He also engaged in personal diplomacy, offering marriage alliances, religious tolerance, and trade incentives to regional leaders and tribal chieftains. These personal gestures fostered loyalty, created informal alliances, and brought scattered regions back under Ottoman sway. Where his brothers had ruled through fear and military power, Mehmed ruled through negotiation and trust. Perhaps the most impressive result of Mehmed's diplomacy was the reputation it rebuilt for the Ottoman Empire. Within a decade, foreign ambassadors once again treated the Sultan's court with respect. Trade resumed through Ottoman ports. Letters from European kings and Persian governors referred to Mehmed with titles of honor. The empire, which had been a laughingstock during the interregnum, was now recognized as a stable and rising power, thanks not to conquest, but to calculated, visionary diplomacy. By the time Mehmed I passed away in 1421, the Ottoman Empire had not regained its former size, but it had regained something far more important: credibility. Through the wise and carefully measured diplomacy of Mehmed I, the empire that had nearly fallen apart after Bayezid I's defeat was once again seen as stable, rational, and capable of participating in the complex political world of both Europe and the Islamic East. His relationships with regional rulers, both Christian and Muslim, ensured that the Ottomans would not only survive, but would be ready to thrive in the decades to come. Perhaps one of the greatest legacies of Mehmed I's diplomacy was the way he prevented a major crusade against the Ottoman Empire at a time when it was still weak. During the interregnum, Christian rulers in Europe had viewed the Ottoman civil war as an opportunity to strike. But Mehmed's restraint, treaties, and willingness to renew tributary relationships with Balkan states created an environment in which a united Christian campaign never materialized. His peace with the Byzantines, tribute agreements with Serbia and Wallachia, and quiet disengagement from Persian affairs meant that the empire could rebuild without the pressure of external invasion. This stability would later give his son Murad II the chance to focus on expansion rather than internal survival. Moreover, Mehmed's trust building with former enemies reshaped the region's balance of power. Balkan rulers who had once openly challenged Ottoman authority now saw value in cooperating. By allowing them to retain local control and simply acknowledge Ottoman suzerainty through tribute and military assistance, Mehmed avoided the rebellions and uprisings that had plagued his predecessors. These arrangements meant that, for the first time in years, Ottoman influence extended across the Balkans without constant warfare. It also laid the groundwork for future military campaigns. When Murad II later launched attacks deeper into Europe, he was operating from a foundation of regional compliance already established by his father. In the east, Mehmed's handling of the Persian frontier ensured that the Ottoman Empire would not be distracted by a second war front. His refusal to challenge the Timurids or provoke their allies allowed him to focus on internal affairs. While the eastern threat was always present, Mehmed's non-provocative diplomacy created enough space for the empire to rebuild. His strategy was not to win over the Timurids with bold action, but to survive them by making war undesirable. Trade routes were left open, religious groups were left untouched, and local Anatolian rulers were brought under Ottoman influence without provoking a Timurid response. This strategy of calculated restraint would be copied by future sultans facing larger threats like the Safavid Empire. Another important contribution was Mehmed I's ability to blend diplomacy with pragmatism. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He never postured with false strength. Instead, he communicated through small but effective actions, releasing prisoners, returning property, allowing religious freedoms, and sending symbolic gifts to foreign courts. He presented the Ottoman Empire not as a threat to Christian or Persian sovereignty, but as a central and stabilizing power that could coexist within the regional order. This subtle repositioning had enormous consequences. It allowed the Ottomans to avoid war, attract trade, and present themselves as the protectors of balance in a time of shifting loyalties. Mehmed also played a key role in reviving diplomatic institutions within the empire. He re-established the Ottoman chancery system, which processed foreign correspondence, recorded treaties, and organized diplomatic protocol. Ambassadors were received with honor, protocol was formalized, and envoys were sent abroad with clearly defined roles. This brought a new level of professionalism to Ottoman foreign policy. It signaled to Europe and the Islamic world that the empire had returned to serious statecraft, not just brute power. This institutional diplomacy allowed for smoother transitions in leadership. When Murad II took the throne, foreign powers did not question the continuity of treaties or the legitimacy of the Ottoman government. That confidence came from the precedent Mehmed had built. Long-term, Mehmed's diplomatic groundwork shaped the Ottoman attitude toward international politics for generations. His preference for peace when possible, tribute over conquest when necessary, and stabilization before expansion became key features of Ottoman strategy throughout the 5th–10th century. Later sultans such as Murad II and Mehmed II would benefit enormously from the peaceful borders and diplomatic credibility that Mehmed I had earned. They could fight battles of choice, not battles of survival. They could plan sieges like that of Constantinople, knowing that their rear borders were secure. That confidence was not a given, it was earned through Mehmed's diplomacy. His influence extended even into cultural and religious relations. By making peace with Christian and Persian rulers, Mehmed modeled a form of tolerant pragmatism that allowed the Ottoman Empire to govern over multiple faiths without destabilizing sectarian conflict. His actions proved that diplomacy could succeed across religious boundaries. His ability to deal fairly with Christian leaders helped dispel the image of the Ottomans as mere invaders. His policy of non-interference with Persian Islam helped avoid Sunni Shia tensions within Anatolia. This inclusive posture would become essential as the Ottoman Empire expanded into even more diverse regions. Though Mehmed ruled for only 8 years, the effects of his diplomacy lasted generations. His reign, often overshadowed by the grandeur of his successors, was the reset button the empire needed. It redefined Ottoman engagement with both East and West. It proved that diplomacy was not a sign of weakness, but a necessary tool of empire building. And most importantly, it ensured that the Ottomans could rebuild their strength and plan for the future. In many ways, Mehmed I's reign marked the transition from a tribal warrior state to a mature state-level power capable of both warfare and diplomacy. His handling of foreign relations created a sustainable system, one where peace was bought, enemies were turned into partners, and rivals were outmaneuvered without costly conflict. The empire he left behind was no longer a fragmented battleground. It was a stable, diplomatically respected force with the infrastructure to rise once again. After Mehmed's death in 1421, his son Murad II took the throne without resistance. Foreign rulers did not challenge his legitimacy. Treaties held firm. Tribute payments continued. The empire remained intact. That peaceful transfer of power in itself was a testimony to Mehmed's success. Through strategic restraint, calculated treaties, and an unwavering focus on restoration over revenge, Mehmed I had achieved what no one thought possible. After the chaos of civil war. He made the world believe in the Ottoman Empire again. And that belief, that restored credibility, would become the foundation upon which his descendants would build an empire that would last for centuries.